Hey guys, and welcome to the ACT writing method video. So in the last video, in the overview, we went over how the writing section of the test is scored, how not to get a 0, and kind of the really bare minimum basics of what readers look for on the test. In this video, we're going to break it down even further, and we're going to go into what method you should employ in order to actually write the essay, how to come up with good examples, how to dissect the prompt, all of the kind of key things that you're going to need to do on test day in order to achieve your best score. So in terms of the basic method, it's pretty easy to remember, and hopefully most of you have been employing the basic steps already. So first is you examine the prompt and you plan. That should take you about 5 minutes. So if it takes you 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm okay with that. 5 minutes and 10 seconds, okay, that's fine. But you really do want to keep it to about 5 minutes. And don't skimp on that time either, because I know a lot of students look at the first step and say, okay, that's great. I'll read the prompt as fast as possible, and I'll jump in because otherwise I'm going to run out of time. That's not really the best of ideas, because the issue with that strategy is that you don't really have a clear grasp of what you're going to write about, and it actually slows you down while you're writing, and it leads to a much less clear essay. Okay, next you write your essay. It's pretty self-explanatory. And the last step is you proofread your essay. So proofreading your essay should take between 2 and 3 minutes. And that leaves us about 22 minutes for writing your essay, for a total of 30 minutes. Obviously, that 22 minutes could also go to 23. It all depends on how much time you spend on proofreading. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and pop into each of these steps and really examine what we're supposed to do. Okay, so the first step is your prompt and plan step. We're going to go ahead and jump into what the prompts look like first, and then discuss how we're going to plan for them. One of the great things about the ACT writing section is that the prompt is always going to be about a real-world problem or a debate over, a potential real-world issue. So for most of them, what that means is it's school-related. Not every essay is going to be school-related. Some of them are not, but all of them are some sort of real-world problem. Now, these topics can range anything from should science classes be segregated along gender lines, and yeah, I've actually seen that real essay, to one of the weirdest ones I've ever encountered. There was one about power plants and what rules should govern how close they can be to schools given certain emissions. So that last one's on the more bizarre spectrum of things, but normally they're things like school uniforms, pros and cons, or should schools have valedictorians, should schools have the honor roll, all the kinds of normal things that you encounter in your own school and everyone pretty much encounters in their school. So in terms of what they're talking about, it's generally not so bad. Now, the way they set it up is there's going to be a paragraph that's going to present the issue, and it'll also give you 2 conflicting viewpoints on it. So they'll say something along the lines of a school is thinking of getting rid of their dress code and letting people wear whatever they want instead of wearing a school uniform. Some people think that this is a good idea because it allows students to express individuality, but others think that this is a bad idea because it makes it easier for kids to feel self-conscious or pressured into buying, expensive jeans, that sort of thing. So it'll give you the idea, the pro and the con point, and then it'll ask you, in your opinion, should this school or should high schools in general do this. In the second paragraph, it'll give you the directions. Now, in note on the directions, you guys should read them. We're going to go over a sample essay prompt, and the directions are in that prompt. But you guys should read them a couple times now so that on test day you don't have to read them, because it'll save you about 30 seconds. And trust me, those 30 seconds could be precious to you at the very end of your essay. So it's always going to say, in your essay, take a position on this question. You may write about either one of the 2 points of view given, or you may present a different point of view on this question. Use specific reasons to support your position. So it gives you an option. You can say, the pro kind of side of the argument, the con side of the argument, or make up your own. A note on making up your own: if you're going to do that, just be extremely careful that you are still staying on topic. So for instance, if I'm going to talk about the school uniform example that I've thrown out there, if you're going to make your own position, that's fine, but it has to relate to school uniforms in some way. It can't talk about something, loosely related. So most of the time what your own position is going to be is you take part of one argument and part of the other argument, and you kind of pick the pieces that you really like and say, these pieces could work together for the following reasons. However, these other pieces should not be implemented because of these following negative reasons. So you've got 3 possible positions you can take, and all 3 of them are equally acceptable, equally favorable to the readers. You just have to support yourself with really, really specific examples in order to do a great job on this. So let's go ahead and look at the planning. Now, in terms of your planning, there's a few things that are going to be vitally important to test day success here. So the first thing is, the most important sentence in your entire essay is your thesis. So during your planning time, you're going to write your thesis. So the reason that you write it here, even though you're going to write it, probably 2 minutes or so later, is that you want to make sure that, one, when you write it down, it doesn't have any grammatical or even stylistic errors. And then the second thing is, writing it down and then writing down your examples is going to be a really easy, clear way of checking that everything goes together. So it just makes sure that you know exactly what you need to tie your examples into. So always write down your thesis and then your examples. So a note on examples: you want them to be specific. So you need to have a lot of details, and you also need them to matter in some way. So the idea is they need to tie back to your thesis easily. The easy check for that is when you write down your example, you ask, do I know a lot about this? If yes, then great, you can be specific on it. If not, choose another example. And then the other thing is, so what? Which is basically, does this tie back to my thesis? Does this matter? Do I care? So they have to be specific, and they have to be relevant to what you're writing about. The other note on them is that you want to start out at least with 3 of them. So you want 3 specific and relevant examples. The reason you want 3, in general, and again, you can write a perfect essay with 1 extremely extended example, but you better have the perfect example if you're going to pull that off. But in general, if you have 3, you can write a 5-paragraph essay that tends to be an easy, fast, clear way of getting a good score. And if you go for 3 examples and you run out of time and land at 2, you have a 4-paragraph essay, which is still fine and can still get you a perfect score if it is extremely well written. The good thing about having 3 examples is that they can be very good, but they don't have to be flawless in order to get you that perfect score. Whereas if you have 2 examples, they better be very close to perfect if you want a 12 in your essay. So plan for 3, and then if you don't get all 3 in and you get 2 in, then it's not the end of the world. You at least have 2 really solid examples. Okay, so after your first 5 minutes, you're on to writing your actual essay. So in your writing step, you basically, first off, need to get something on the page. So try not to be the person who gets really super nervous and doesn't know how to start and just doesn't start. Once you make a good plan, you want to just dive straight into the essay. And remember that if you start, after 5 minutes, you can always go back and proofread if the beginning is a little shaky because of nerves. So make sure that you just start, because you don't want to end up not getting any of your ideas on the page, because that's really not going to be productive or conductive to you getting a good score. So when you're writing, there's a few important things. So obviously, everything you write down, we want it to be as perfect as possible. But there's a few things that are slightly more important than others. So on that list is the thesis. So make sure that your thesis is free of grammatical or stylistic errors and that it addresses the prompt and isn't too random. And that especially is a worry when you're doing your, the third option essay, as I like to call it, the kind of write your own position. Just make sure that it addresses the prompt. So thesis is really important. The next are your examples. So as we went over in the slide before, you need to have really specific, really relevant examples, and you have to make the connection between your examples and your thesis. If you don't make that connection, then it really doesn't count as being a relevant example at all. And then the last thing is the conclusion. So, if you are running out of time, it is a much better idea to just end your last example paragraph however you can, and try to end the sentence. Don't stop in the middle of it. But if you only have a minute, let's say, until time is going to be called, just finish up the sentence you have on examples and then rewrite the thesis as a conclusion, just so that there is a 1-sentence conclusion there. It's better if you have a little bit longer of a conclusion, but in general they only really need to be maybe 3 sentences long. And even if you have 1 sentence down, you get the points for having the organization. Now, you might not get the points for having the good argument that you normally would have in your conclusion, but you at least are doing a good job in terms of organization, and that's really, really important. So please, please, please always put in a conclusion no matter what. So thesis, examples, and conclusion, most important things you can do. And generally you're shooting for about a 5-paragraph essay. That's pretty normal in terms of the easiest way that you can get a perfect score. Okay, your last step is step 3, proofread. So you're going to go through your essay in about 2 to 3 minutes and you're going to proofread it. Now, this is a little bit more, I suppose, personal than the other steps, in that some people are going to know off the bat that they have an issue with a certain grammatical concept, and that's what they're going to look for. If you know what your main issue is, then that's great. Go through, try to find it, try to fix it, because if it does come up over and over and over again, that's going to start to distract from the readability of your essay. Now, if you're not sure, if you don't generally have grammar issues, or if you do, but, just the occasional error, or you'll have one error that's subject-verb agreement, and one that's modifiers, and another one that's shifting between you and one, but you don't have one consistent error that you generally make, then you want to make sure that, if nothing else, you read through the intro, the first sentences and last sentences of each example paragraph, and the conclusion. So the idea is that organization is important, can't stress that enough, and you at least make sure that the structure of your argument makes sense. Now, in those 2 to 3 minutes, if you're not finding a lot of errors, you probably can read everything else, and you definitely should. And what you're doing is you're looking for clarity, and you're looking for any errors that are going to make the reader confused about what your argument is, or make them stop and reread the sentence because they're not sure what exactly is going on. Okay, in terms of proofreading, the idea is be very neat and organized. So, I have written a sentence. So, I am writing an essay, fake high. Pseudo high would also work here. So, if I'm writing an essay about fake high and I forget the word about, then what I would do is I would put a nice little caret right here, and then right above it, I would say about. I'm writing an essay about fake high, or on fake high, etc., etc. The caret and then writing right above works really well. It's neat, it looks nice, it's easy for them to see, and they won't mind that it's there. Okay, let's say that I accidentally skipped a much bigger part of that sentence. Okay, in this case, I was thinking faster than I could write, and instead of saying I am writing an essay about fake high, I say I am about fake high. Okay, that doesn't quite make any sense. So, I'm not going to be able to fit writing an essay above about without making this really messy and hard to read. So in this case, I would put a nice little asterisk right where I have the issue, and then at the bottom of the page, or the bottom of the last page if you don't have any room, you draw the asterisk again, and then you write in what you want to be there. So in this case, I would say writing an essay. Okay. The other thing is, if you completely want to delete some information, you just put one line through it. Okay, so in this sentence, I am writing an essay about the awesome fake high. Okay, now I could decide the awesome doesn't really fit in here. So I would take a nice neat line and go through the, and a nice neat line and go through awesome. Notice I did not erase the word awesome. The reason I didn't erase is that when you erase, you tend to not actually get rid of every last little bit of graphite that's on the page. So what ends up happening is that your essay is put in a stack with lots of other essays. And the smudge that you have on your essay gets worse because, you know, your paper is rubbing against other papers, and especially if someone else has, you know, kind of excessive pencil markings everywhere, it gets really smudgy, it gets hard to read, and if you have a little gray cloud and then you write over it, it's really, really hard for them to read it. So just take a nice, neat little strike right through them, the words you want to get rid of, and it looks really nice. Other than that, anything you need to do, let's say you need to do a paragraph indent, you just can put a paragraph sign next to wherever you want to make an indent. If you want to cross out like one letter, you just cross out the letter right at above. The idea is you're going to be as neat as possible.